Namaskar viewers. Hello and welcome to Sunset TV. I am Tina Jha. You're watching Perspective. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a two-day visit to Russia for the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit. Now, since the year 2000, the two countries have held 21 annual summits, the last one being in New Delhi in 2021, which was when Russian President Putin visited India. While the 22nd annual summit comes after a gap of 3 years, it's significant in more ways than one. It marks Prime Minister Modi's first bilateral visit since assuming office for a third term. It's also his 8th straight summit with Russian President Putin. As per the MEA, both leaders will review the entire range of multifaceted relations between India and Russia and also exchange views on contemporary regional and global issues of mutual interest. The key focus of the visit, tangible outcomes that it is expected to yield, and the long-standing relationship between India and Russia. These are some aspects we will talk about in Perspective today. And for this, joining me are two guests. I'm pleased to welcome on this program former Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri. Ambassador, delighted to have you with us on this edition of Perspective. And also pleased to welcome Dr. Meena Singh Roy, former Research Fellow, MP IDSA. Dr. Roy, welcome to Sunset TV. Thank you for your time. In fact, let me begin the program today with you, Dr. Roy. Before we go on to discuss the key focus areas of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia, help us and our viewers understand the symbolic significance of the Prime Minister's first bilateral visit to Russia. And I ask you this because there was an informal tradition that we see the Prime Minister, after getting elected for a new term, would begin his bilateral visits with a country in the neighborhood. And in the past, in 2014, in 2019, we saw the Prime Minister do that, but not in his third term. He chose to go to Russia for his first bilateral visit. So help us understand about the symbolic significance of this move.
Well, as far as, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia is concerned, it is special in many ways, if we look at it. As you mentioned that, it has always been connected with some other visits and then, to Russia. But when we look at geopolitical context today and we look at, what is unfolding in the world, today, it also speaks of, particularly very, very significant place which India-Russia relations, have enjoyed in past. So I think it is unique in that sense because it is rooted in history. We've had very strong ties with Russia. And when people talk about changes, yes, that is the part and parcel of any bilateral relationships that we talk about. But when we look at the relationship, the strategic partnership in that sense, I think the strong pillars of partnerships do get reflected in the way it has evolved, the way it has been shown in past, not only in 2 decades, but even before that. Yeah. So I think it's a new beginning in many ways, but they are based on very, very strong, platform. So I think that makes it very important, and it also shares the thought of Indian government that what is the place of Russia when we are talking about India's growing ties with the entire world, and where does Russia stand? Where does India-Russia partnership stand? And there is a personal dynamics also which needs to be, talked about today. While, when he became Prime Minister, of course, we have seen the relationship growing, but with many ups and downs, I would say. But at the same time, if we look at the personal contact of Prime Minister Modi, then it started way back in 2001, as a Chief Minister. So I think the personal connect, the historical ties, and the growing importance of Russia, in terms of geography, in terms of connect, in terms of our long-standing, defense, security, regional. I mean, name an area where we don't miss Russia as far as our partnership is concerned.
Right. So in that aspect, how do we expect this crucial visit of the Prime Minister to build up to that relationship is something that we will discuss in the course of the program. But Ambassador, your thoughts on this crucial visit. It comes after a gap of 3 years, the annual summit, and we see the Prime Minister, in fact, going to Russia after a gap of 5 years. So the question here is, in between these 3 years, between 21 to 24, a lot has changed globally and dramatically in that context also. What are some of the issues that you see having piled up that both leaders would like to bring to the table when they meet?
Thank you, Tina. Very important. And I think I agree with you wholeheartedly when you say there's been quite a shift in the world. Let me just make a simple point. India is now the largest country in the world, fourth or fifth largest economy in the world, and therefore we held the G20 presidency. So a lot has happened even in terms of India and our place in the world.
Right.
I think, let me answer a few of the points that you made right at the beginning. You spoke about the tradition of the Indian Prime Minister first visiting the neighborhood. But you know, this is Prime Minister Modi's third term. There is continuation of what was happening. And this is perhaps the most important point for him, to personally go and meet global leaders. That look, India is stable, policies are going to go on, the government is in place. That's exactly what we are doing.
Right.
Immediately after being sworn in, he met the G7 leader. And now he's meeting the president of Russia. In between, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh came to India. So, and for this swearing in, a lot of our neighboring heads of government and heads of state, etc. came. So there has been a very quick connect, come back to business and taking things forward. So that's very important. I so much agree with what Meena said about the issue of, you know, the personal, the chemistry. These things are quite important in the world. Now, what are the big issues that would come up? I mean, I think in your introduction, you mentioned things about trade. We'll discuss this when you take this up. But I think fundamental points that we are making is that India is a country that values its relationships with Russia. Russia is an important partner. At the same time, of course, we value our relationship with the Western world. So, you know, it's not that we have a lean in one direction. We have a lean, as we like to say, we are multi-aligned. We have a lean in all the directions which are mutually benefit to us and which contribute to global. And I think all of this is particularly important. You know, the world also hasn't changed. Although COVID took us to the era of hybrid calls, video calls, and so on and so forth. But the fact is that fundamentally, there is no substitute for in-person meeting. Chemistry between leaders is important. And it underlines in a very strong manner that relationships are strong and people see merit in taking these relationships forward. That's exactly the big point that we are making in this visit, making it right early. The fact that 3 years the annual summit didn't take place, you know, remember, 1 year was COVID. And then we had this entire set of issues with the Russian president finding it a little difficult to travel overseas and so on, various things. The summits went on. They were held in a hybrid mode. I'm glad that we are taking this forward in the manner which truly signifies taking things seriously and significantly forward to mutual benefit.
Okay, Dr. Roy, the fact that both leaders are committed to take this relationship forward. So in that context, can we expect some, new agreements that will take the relationship forward? Or because it comes after a gap of 5 years, will we see both leaders focusing more on sustaining the existing relationship, reviewing the entire framework of the existing relationship?
I personally feel that, you know, it is going to be a mix of both continuity and also, you know, some new agreements, you know, as we move on, because you mentioned about the trade imbalance, if we look at, the scale in which India's trade, I mean, basically, it's because of the recent energy, you know, the oil trade. If we look at 23-24, then it's probably more than $65 billion trade. And when we look at the imports, they've been around $4 billion only. So I think, this is what there must be some. In addition to that, there could be some new agreements which we might see unfolding, what we've been hearing. It could be, reciprocal engagement of logistic agreement that has been talked about. The FTA with Eurasian Economic Community is being pending. So let's see what kind of a package we get at the end of the visit. Not only that, I think when we look at the security dynamics, when we look at the recent, cases of Indian youth joining, the Russian army, there again, it is something which probably might figure out between the discussion. But I guess it would be a mix package of deals that we look forward to.
Okay, Ambassador, trade imbalance is something that's emerged as a key concern between India and Russia relationship. Which are the sectors in which India can look to promote its exports to Russia?
Thank you. This is a question which has bedeviled us not today, but 40 years back it used to bedevil us. And if any of you recall a famous thing called the India-Russia rupee trade agreement, which also resulted in the Russians piling up huge amounts of Indian rupees and not knowing what to do with them. Now look, I know it's a bit difficult for all of us to admit, but the fact is that we are not a great exporting country. This is a fact. Russian consumption levels, and given their economic situation, are not that great. The kind of things that we are big in, software exports, other things, etc., are tailored and basically directed in the direction of the Western world. Consumables are things that are important that we can do. But let's also understand in the last 20 odd years, the Russian economy itself has become fairly Western oriented. And so preferences, etc., many of them have changed. Now, this recent trade imbalance is really something which is the cause of just something which happened in the last 3 years. The trade imbalance was not of this order at all. And it has happened as a result of something that has happened with which India has had nothing to do. The Ukraine-Russia conflict, the embargo in terms of Russian exports of oil and petrochemicals and other products to the European Union, the Americas, and so on. And this is the state of play. But let me leave this thought with you. While, of course, there is this particular imbalance between us, and rightly, governments are focused on what they can do. And I'm sure they're looking at areas where things can be done. I mean, this imbalance has resulted in global oil price stability. This is a very interesting aspect. If supposing India had also been pushing for exactly the same major global oil suppliers in the Middle East, can you imagine what would be oil at the pump in European countries and in the United States, what it would have been? So, many things are unsaid, but many things equalize in the world of economics. Now, I want to make one other point to you. It's political. And that point is, bilaterally, there is a lot that we need to speak about. Multilaterally, there's much that we need to speak about. But there's one more thing where I think a personal one-on-one conversation with the Russian president would be important for us, and that involves China. The whole world has seen in the last couple of years, and people say the Ukraine war, otherwise geopolitics and the change what is happening, Russia and China are in a sense becoming a kind of a duality, partnership, and so on. We need to speak to the Russians at the highest level and remind them of their partnership with India. Remind them also of the issues that remain, and they are extremely problematic issues vis-a-vis the Chinese. And so, therefore, Russian situation in this particular thing, we need to ensure remains remains one which ameliorates the situation and certainly doesn't give the Chinese any reason to feel more, let me say, empowered or more enthused about it, etc. I think these things are also particularly important, quite apart from telling the Russians that, look, we have a relationship with the West, a growing relationship, but we also have a relationship with you, a relationship that we cherish, a relationship that we will maintain, and a relationship that we want to take forward.
And especially, about India-Russia relationship, Dr. Roy, it said it's a time-tested relationship. So if we look at Russia's growing dependence on China, and especially over the last couple of years, because fueled by the Russia-Ukraine war, it's become challenging for India to counterbalance its relationship with Russia. And that's something that the ambassador says should be spoken of at the highest level. Will the 22nd annual summit, I mean, it provides the right opportunity. The Kremlin spokesperson was in fact also quoted as saying that the two leaders will have enough time to hold informal talks as well. Do you think the Prime Minister will raise this issue because it is going to affect the larger ambit of the India-Russia relationship?
Well, if we look at, as I said, when we talk about the major players, we also need to look at the context in which these relationships have developed and are developing today. There have been changes when we talk about bilateral relationship between India and US, India and EU, India and Russia. So is the relationship between Russia and China. Now, when it comes to India, I do believe and I do feel when we see the relationship unfolding, it is very important in the international relations to convey the message. I think messaging is very, very important component of any good, relationship that we are expecting. In that context, I think, conveying our point of view, whether it is China and Pakistan, that has been and will need to be communicated to Russia. And I think Russia does understand. Russia is in a very, very difficult situation today, whether we talk about economy, whether we talk about, the isolation, the sanctions. And Russia also understands the significance and importance of its ties with India. Now, but I think their relationship with China is the necessity for now. I would say so long as, things in the international context, when we see, these bilaterals, trilaterals happening. But I am sure that, the Russia would not like to get into any deal or any situation where, Indian interest would be harmed. So that, I think, is the bottom line. But at the same time, I do believe that the messaging will definitely be there. So from that point of view, and there are undercurrents when we are looking at Russia-China relationship also. I mean, why India is so important when it comes to India-Russia relations in the regional context and in the global context. So both the countries need each other, and it is definitely a time-tested relationship.
Ambassador, is it also significant that at a time when the Prime Minister will be in Russia, the NATO allies will also be meeting around the same time in Washington? Symbolically, what is the kind of messaging that this visit will bring forth for the NATO countries? And especially for Russia, what does this mean?
So, Tina, thank you very much. Very good question, excellently said. Look, several times things happen, not necessarily because they are planned, but they happen the way they are. In any case, let's look at the messaging. I have repeatedly said, India believes that it is a country which follows multi-alignment. Our Prime Minister, his first foreign tour after taking over as the third time was to the G7 summit. He has met them all, met all the major players of the NATO alliance, all of them in that particular context. He's now going to Russia. So, we are keeping this up, that we are aligned with all those who are aligned with our interests. And so that's a straightforward message. Of course, there would be people, there would be analysts who would read into this the same kind of things that, look, is this an alternate alliance? Well, look, India is multi-alliance. We are saying that. And this is something which absolutely remains. Now, we spoke about China, and Meena also mentioned this particular thing about Pakistan. I think Afghanistan, Pakistan are also very important elements. Russia has a role to play. Russia has always had a role to play. India can't just forsake Afghanistan and what is going on out there. There is an abiding interest at the level of people. So there is a lot in terms of regional geopolitics. The China angle is just one thing. Also, the business of the Chinese and what they're trying to do in Afghanistan becomes a set of issues, not just in terms of bilateral India-China versus US, Russia, China, and so on. All of this is important. I think this is a visit which signals India as a major player, India as a player which is multi-aligned, India is a player which looks at its interests but also plays a global role for global good stability and in terms of trying to see, how can we ensure that there is dialogue, there is conversation, and that the world tries to find solutions to problems which may otherwise seem intractable.
Right. Dr. Roy, I'll take one question from you, and this relates to taking the relationship forward. I recall there were several opportunities that both India and Russia had explored in the maritime sector, also in terms of the transport corridors that we had spoken about, and this was also aimed at expanding the trade potential. If I may ask you about the progress that we have made in these particular sectors?
I think, there is much more that can be done if we are looking at these three areas that you talked about. Mm-hmm. When we talked about connectivity, I started working on it when people were very dismissive about the connectivity projects when we talk about, India, Russia, and beyond India, Central Asia, or India, Iran, INSTC, and other, connectivity. But these are long-term, issues, connectivity projects. There would be problems, there would be challenges, but, people have to be a little patient when we're talking about the connectivity issues, and especially when we look at the geopolitics, the sanctions, many other issues. So I do feel what we have achieved in terms of connectivity, there is much more that can be done, and there is a very serious effort on that, whether we look at Chabahar or, beyond when we talk about connectivity. But when we talk about the maritime issues, I think on Indo-Pacific, we have some difference of opinion when it comes to India and Russia. But when we talk about the larger regional and global issues, then I think, when we talk about extremism and terrorism, the maritime threats, nobody benefits, not even Russia benefits out of it. So as I said, certain issues will have to be, there aren't immediate answers to a very complicated issues, in particularly when the whole world is divided on many conflicts or many issues when we look at it. So making, efforts, putting them on the table itself, I would say, is an achievement when there is difference of opinion on those issues. So I do feel that these issues are going to be discussed and talked. How much, is going to be, coming forward in the concrete form, that we'll have to wait and see. But, let's not, expect that, suddenly things are going to change, in one visit. I don't think that is going to happen. But it's a challenging time. It's also a time where there are a lot of opportunities open for India and Russia. And I think as a nation, we need to look at the mutual benefits where we can move forward, whether it is the cooperation in the areas where Russia will benefit, India will benefit, and where we have difference of opinion, we need to push them so that there is a mutual understanding and we come to an agreement on some common points, or we are able to convince, that these are the problems and challenges, and that's how we need to probably move forward.
Several of these we will expect both leaders to take up at the delegation level talks, during the informal talks, the restricted talks, all of which have been listed by the MEA in its document. So let's see how the meeting goes forth and how the two leaders decide the future course of action, the future course of relationship for India and Russia. Time allows me to take up only that much on this edition of Perspective. Thank you to both my guests. Once again, Ambassador Puri, Dr. Roy, for joining us on Sunset TV and helping us and our viewers understand about the importance of this visit. Also, how India-Russia relationship has evolved over the years, the challenges that both countries need to take in the current geopolitical context. So all eyes will be on how the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin goes by and the tangible outcomes, something that we will find time to discuss on the channel as well. But for now, it's a wrap on this edition of Perspective, viewers. Thank you very much for your time as well.